I have been sitting with names over the past few days. Peggy Warden, Emily, Gregory, Megan Hill, and their mother, Crystal Holcomb, Mark Holcomb and baby Noah, John and Carla Holcomb, Dennis and Sarah Johnson, Karen and Robert Marshall, Emily Garcia, Brooke Ward and their mother, Joanne Ward, Lula White, Robert and Shawnee Corrigan, Keith Brandon, Tara McNulty, Annabelle Pomeroy, Therese and Ricardo Rodriguez, Haley Kruger. I've been sitting with the faces of First Baptist Church, smiling, dour, radiant, holding children, smiling around a kitchen table of baked bread ready to be given away as gifts, accomplished. I've been sitting with these names and faces, not praying per se, not crying out, but consciously slowing myself down and holding these names and images in my being, trying to push against a culture that keeps shouting its bad advice. Move on. Nothing's going to change anyway. Get over it. The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. It seems like we're in a centrifuge machine, you know? That machine that spins an object so fast and furiously that the component parts of the whole cannot withstand the speed or the spin and so are forced into separation. Whatever the qualities and strengths that keep the whole together are lost, and the separate parts are flung in any number of directions, from the outermost reaches or clinging to the inner axis. We are being asked to comprehend the incomprehensible over and over again at breakneck speeds. We are spun so fast and furiously in our daily lives that our relatedness to one another, our connections to what is holy and holy, is barely holding. Individual rights are divorced from communal responsibility. Gratification is divorced from conscience. Religion is divorced from our real-world actions and relationships, and politics is divorced from principle. Nothing makes sense. And so many of us resort to cynicism or simply praying that we are not the next ones to fall in the mayhem. Yet hidden in the rubble, hidden in that mayhem of disaster, is a clue to finding our way back, or perhaps finding our way forward. In her book, A Paradise Built in Hell, essayist and social critic Rebecca Solnit studied and examined all kinds of disasters: the 1906 earthquake and fires in San Francisco, the Halifax munitions cargo ship explosion of 1917, the Mexico City earthquake of 1985, the events of 9/11, and Hurricane Katrina. And what she found was extraordinary and affirming. In the disaster, in disaster after disaster, what she found was that people would respond to these events in communitarian ways. that in the face of disaster, whatever we think separates us falls away, and we see a glimpse of who we really are and what else our society could be. Solnit writes, just as many machines reset themselves to their original settings after a power outage, so human beings reset themselves to something altruistic, communitarian, resourceful, and imaginative after a disaster. We revert to something we already know how to do. In Katrina, all kinds of people jumped into boats, many of them from Texas, heading into the disaster, not running away from it, but towards it. They didn't say to themselves, well, I can't rescue everyone, so I might as well not try. My efforts won't make a difference anyway, so I think I'll stay home. No, they jumped in their single-engine boats, their rowboats, and headed towards the deep water and started pulling kids and grandfathers and single mothers off their roofs and into safety. Solnit says that the trouble arises not in our improvised collective responses, but in top-down initiatives that dampen our natural surge towards citizenship. For example, President Bush encouraging us all to shop after 9/11. Or even worse, a news media that amplifies a false narrative that people behave badly in crisis, fueling a kind of panic. Solnit calls this elite panic, and it is the source of so many bad and, quite frankly, racist decisions, like the militarized response to the Katrina disaster, where instead of people being helped and rescued in New Orleans was turned into a prison, and people were treated like animals. In Minnesota, our reset button is activated every winter, at least once. It's when we have one of our big blizzards. And it's always a joyful day, in my estimation, because of what is revealed. Everyone comes out of their houses. We all look down the block. We see the snow piled high over all the cars, all the way down. And so everybody goes back into their house, puts on their snow suits, gets their shovels, gets out their snow blowers, and we all start digging one another out. And it's not just about neighbors helping neighbors. Invariably, and I swear to God this happens every year, some guy shows up with a hitch and a chain and says, hey, can I help pull you out? And nobody knows who this guy is. He just shows up every time, and it's a different guy every year. There is something about disasters and even horrific events of violence that resets something in our being, and we remember who we really are, what we really are. Jeremiah described it long ago as a covenant inscribed on our very hearts, this bond of love and right relationship. You don't learn it in a school. It's just in you, placed in you from your very inception. The grace we are out looking for in this desert is out looking for us. And we can access it, Jeremiah says. We don't run into disaster out of fear and despair. We run into the flames or the flood or the snowstorm or the rain of bullets out of love. Last Sunday, I watched as Stephen Williford, the neighbor who confronted Devin Kelly outside First Baptist Church, speak as tears clung to every word. I'm not a hero, he said. I'm not brave. I don't want the focus to be on me or anything I did. I want our attention to be on my friends, my neighbors who lost their lives today. These are my people. I know Stephen Williford is now being used as a poster boy for NRA, but I ask you to look beyond the rhetoric and the false narrative of either-or thinking and recognize the covenant of love from which Stephen Williford was moved to act. Over and over, Stephen talked about being incredibly scared, standing in his stocking feet, confronting the shooter, running toward disaster, not from it, running toward the stranger in the pickup, and both of them heading into danger without hesitation. Peggy Warden didn't throw her body over her grandson out of fear, nor did her grandson then kick at a young girl to have her stay underneath the pew. He didn't kick her out of despair. None of these folks said so in words, but they proclaimed it in deed. We are compelled to act by love. We are here to love. Now, I'm not talking about the syrup and saccharin kind of love that we are bombarded with in commercials and romantic comedies. I'm talking about the kind of love that is self-expending, other-affirming, community-forming power of love. That is my understanding of God, of what the God flow is, a self-expending, other-affirming, community-forming power. This is what is rebooted and accessed within us, even in the mayhem. At a gathering of professionals and religious leaders, the Dalai Lama asked, "What is the cause of suffering?" And the leaders listed many things: poverty, injustice, war, racism, alienation. And after listening for a while, he abruptly interrupted them and said, "No. No. The cause of suffering is when good people begin their work together and fail to notice what is between them." Jesus put it this way: take this most seriously. A yes on earth is a yes in heaven. A no on earth is a no in heaven. What you say to one another matters. I mean this. When two of you get together on anything at all on earth and make a prayer of it, God goes into action. Whenever two or more are gathered together in these pews, in the snowstorm, in racial justice actions, in meetings, in work, and we make a prayer of it, we access this sacred geometry of two or three. The sacred geometry of two or three connected, and we remember what is whole and holy and manifested on earth. Yes, we come together at church to find solace and refuge, but we do more than that. We are here to remember ourselves. Remember, reattach to that covenant placed in our hearts that is altruistic, communitarian, resourceful, and imaginative. That covenant that says that we are not meant to be in isolation. We are not meant to be separate. We are meant to be connected in love. When a sanctuary becomes a site of violence and the perpetrator tries to explode our trust in community, our faithful fellowship, It is a tragedy, but it has yet to disprove or break that sacred geometry. Example after example attests to this very fact. The people of Charlottesville, Oak Creek, or Knoxville refused to close their church doors or shut down their sanctuary. Instead, they went right back into their holy spaces and said, "We are not going to stop. We are not going to cower in our homes or retreat into despair. We will go right back into the sanctuary and claim what we know to be true. We worship here." Some scholars believe that that passage from the book of Jeremiah that we read today was read over 2,500 years ago by a group of people standing in the rubble of the Temple of Jerusalem after it had been destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian army. Our task as people of faith is to access and hold true to that covenant, that wellspring of connection and love without the crisis or the pressure, without disaster as our impetus. Our work is to align our lives with the fundamental truth found in the deep recesses of our heart. Solness says that this is the great contemporary task of being human. I, for one, think that church is a way of getting out of the centrifuge machine. Church is a place where we slow down enough to remember ourselves and affirm a central goodness from which we will act to heal ourselves and the world. Margaret Wheatley asks us to take nothing personally, to celebrate who is swimming beside us, to banish the word struggle from our vocabulary, and instead move out into the world in sacred purpose, to live our lives in the wisdom of what is between us. Today, I ask you right now to just slow down. Take a deep breath and look around you. Look. Allow your spirit to be held in this body of believers. Let us hold in our beings the names and faces of those who were killed and those that survived, the friends and family left behind, gathering in twos or threes around kitchen tables or leaning over a church pew. Today, we remember their violation is our violation. That we are connected and we hold them in loving embrace, knowing we are all in search of grace after the killing. Knowing that joy arises even from the most profound grief. And that love, that is self-expending, other-affirming, community-forming power, will not let us go. We light these candles as a symbol of our connection and our confidence in that power of love.